Gosh. Okay, welcome back, my friend. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of, I don't know, Ken's Circus, apparently. Um, we've had a whole thing. Basically, it starts because Cameron was late. But here with the lovely and talented Mrs. Kristen DiBiase, who always knows where the echo cancellation button is. Welcome, Kristen. And to the person who's late and then comes in and is echoing and makes us redo this whole thing, Mr. Cameron Jones.
It wasn't me.
It clearly was, though. Like, Kristen and I had a good thing going, and then you come in and, like, all this echoing stuff. Anyways, my friend, let's go ahead and get into the news from this week, because the big news, obviously, the WGA writer strike now over. We are going to go to our resident lawyer, who is going to take us through all the stuff that is kind of in the new contract, I guess. So, Kristen, take it away.
Yeah, so they did vote unanimously, the union leaders did, from WGA to end the strike, lift their restraining order as of this past Wednesday. And so there's a lot of good stuff that is coming out of this deal. So as you recall, they were having the strike and they were in talks with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. That includes top studios like Disney, Paramount, Universal, and Warner Brothers Discovery. The source from which I am telling you this information is the erstwhile and helpful CNBC. I always go there to get my business-related news. So if you want to see what I'm talking about in more depth, you can go to their website and look for this info. So some of the main points of what is coming out in the deal that we are now hearing is the deal is basically a 3-year kind of titrated, staged type of thing. So immediately after ratification of the contract, the deal will have an immediate 5% minimum pay increase for writers. Then on about the anniversary of, the May dates, there will be a 4% bump in 2024. And then another 3.5% bump in May of 2025. That's a total over 3 years of 12.5% of an increase for the writers. One of the major things that we were wondering about that came out of this deal is how they were going to be handling AI in this new era of do it for you, ChatGPT, and all of that stuff. So the writers were able to get some really big concessions out of this negotiation. In terms of use of AI, AI is not allowed to write or rewrite any literary material, and any AI-generated material is not going to be considered source material. So that is going to be a big one. We will not see something that has been mostly written by AI and then cheaply touched up by badly paid writers who come in to make it better and actually humane. So that is awesome. Another area people were really wondering about in this era of streaming when you compare it to the old television network model is what would happen when it comes to residuals. So there's a new residual negotiation that came out of this, and it's going to be based on viewership. So if you have a high budget subscription video on demand series or a film that gets viewed by 20% or more or of the service's domestic viewership in subscribers within the first 90 days of release, then you will get a bonus that's equal to half of the fixed domestic and foreign residual. They're going to be calculating views by hours that are streamed domestically for the season or for the film, and then divide that by the total runtime. January 1 will be when this all goes into effect, and that means that basically numbers-wise, if a writer is doing a half-hour episode, they'll get a little bit more than $9,000 in bonus. If it's an hour-long episode, they'll get $16,400 for a 1 hour, and they'll get $40,500 for a streaming feature that has a budget of $30 million or more. They'll also be doing the total number of hours streamed domestically and internationally for any self-produced high-budget streaming programs like a lot of the Netflix original series that have come out. Across the board, the writers will also see an increased contribution rate to their health and pensions, as well as increased contributions for writing teams. So that was one of those critical pieces, because one of the things that the writers were talking about was how there are these people that are being forced to be in kind of a lone wolf situation, and there's no writer's room anymore. They also looked at improvements in screenwriter compensation, writers' room minimums, and they also renewed their $250,000 showrunner training program. And there's some other pieces that you can go to CNBC and check out this article for if you want to learn more, because there are other pieces, but those are the major parts that kind of lead to this. The showrunner training program part I find interesting but awesome, because one of the things the writers talked about is when you have these kind of lone people just in one space and there's no writer's room, more junior folk who have come in and learned the ropes from being around all those other people who are further along in their careers are not getting that seasoned training, and then they're not able to actually be successful as showrunners. And so this is really important and key.
Yeah, no, thanks. I think that's wonderful. Can you hear me? Am I good?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. I didn't see my lines moving. It's been a show. Okay. It's a night. All right. No, this is great, and I can't help but feeling like this is. Oh gosh, I don't want to go too far, but this is the way that businesses should be operating. They should be working to have programs for their employees to actually move up and to actually be trained. They should be having cost of living increases. It should be real. Like, there's no such thing. I loved this quote that I heard this week. It was like, if you're a millionaire, I think it's either a millionaire or a billionaire. I think it was a billionaire. If you're a billionaire, certainly multimillionaire, and you say that you've gotten to where you've gotten off the strength of your own work and your own labor, you are lying. You got there off the basis of other people's labor. Even if you're not like Bob Iger rich and all that stuff. Let's say you just put your money in the stock market and all of that stuff and you become a multimillionaire by that. By doing that, you are making your money off the back of other people. And I think when we forget that, when Disney forgets that, like, all the stuff they're doing, all this Peter Pan versus Wendy, all this, I hated that movie. Good Dinosaur, I hated that movie too.
Didn't watch it.
What's a good movie that I like? Elemental. We're going to talk about Elemental today. So when you forget that the Elemental and all of these things are the ones that brought you to where you're at, that's when I think you're on this precipice of like people leaving, people, you falling towards a different view. So happy for the writers. Very happy for the writers. I do find it's interesting that the Screen Actors Guild is still out there. The actors are still out there. Kristen, you made a great point that they were 2 months behind. Is that what you said? Like 2 months later? So good point there. But we'll have to see what comes of there. Cameron, what do you got to say?
Well, a couple of things. First off, you're like, well, this is how business should run. Yeah, it took a strike. They had to say, we're not doing this anymore. And then they were like, oh, okay. So
and they weren't like, okay.
No,
like
exactly.
After that. First they were like, well, actually, we're just going to wait them out.
We'll wait them out.
They'll start losing their houses, and it'll be cool.
Exactly. So I'm very happy for the writers, extremely happy. I think that, especially on the streaming side, those details I think are going to be kind of critical to what we see in the deal that the actors get. It's kind of like pilots, like United just got a new contract for their pilots, and it was higher than Delta got. So that means the American Airlines pilots are going to get a raise because they're going to be looking like, well, they got paid more. So I think it's all going to work out. But I don't think we can forget, like, number one, in order for them to do the right by the people that were making them all the money, the people that were making them all the money had to say, we're not making you any more money. And I bet all of these CEOs and whatever, they're going to be like, well, now we're going to have to raise prices. Not because they're going to be losing money, but they wouldn't be able to be getting money on the same level as they were before. And so they're like, oh, well.
And just to clarify that point, they won't be making as much money, which in corporate America, the way things stand, if you're not making as much money, you are losing money.
Which is so
losing
stupid
money.
and ridiculous. I mean, again, I didn't want to say anything when you were talking about
I wasn't gonna say anything,
the
but
stock, when you were talking about the stock market, right? That they're making more money. Like I just thought about that conversation we had the other day, and I was gonna be like, yeah, they're making their money on vibes.
all right.
no,
Well, let's talk about. Hold on. Let's talk about
Yeah.
two things, because I think there's things that are happening that I want people to remember that these things were in motion before this strike. So one of the things that was in motion before the strike was that Disney Plus had a price increase. So Disney Plus, as of October 12th, is going to jump in price. It's going to go from $10.99 a month to $13.99 a month if you have no ads. Hulu's going to increase from $14 to $17.99. And then I think the ESPN tier also increased as well. And so even if you have the bundle, everything was going up. That was in motion before the writer's strike. That was happening before the writer's strike. Another thing that was happening before the writer's strike was Disney cracking down on password sharing. Everybody knew once Netflix did it, it was going to go through the whole streaming area, and this is starting in Canada. As of November 1st, Disney has updated their terms saying you may not share your this is funny. You may not share your subscription outside of your household, and then they went all Kristen lawyerly on you and said household means a collection of devices associated with your primary personal residence that are used by individuals who reside therein. Like, they just said, this is what a household is.
Yeah.
So even as you see this writer strike, I do want to point this out. Even as you see the writers and they're coming back from the strike, even as you see screen actors, they're coming back from the strike, all of this stuff that you're about to see, all of this October stuff, everything like that, that was in the works.
It's because
I don't want to say long before, but it was definitely before the writer strike.
Well, and I'll tell you why. It's because they're trying to treat streaming as, oh, people just want to watch videos on their devices. We'll put these shows on their devices. But they forgot, hey, we were getting ad revenue from this. Like when this was going to TV, we were getting ad revenue, and now we're not getting that. And so, like, I think the funniest part is you have all of these streaming places. Well, what's the number one streaming video site? YouTube. What is all over YouTube? Ads. And so in this push to like, oh, we want to be ad free and all of this stuff, well, you can try to do that, but number one, you don't have nearly the numbers that YouTube does, and you're not charging enough, and you don't have enough active users. Like you cannot command the amount of ad revenue that YouTube commands, like for a Mr. Beast video. Like,
but see, I heard another quote this week that I thought was great, that every major technology that we've called a disruptor, you look at Uber, you look at streaming, you look at some of these other things, everything we've called a disruptor to certain industries has actually just entered the market at a rate that is sub whatever industry they're disrupting, and then realized, oh, wait, that's why they operated that way, and they've had to raise their prices back. Remember, Uber used to be so cheap,
yeah, but
cheap.
they were doing that on purpose already.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I mean, they were operating at a loss on purpose to undercut the traditional model and steal their
Taxes
customer base.
Yeah.
But it's not even stealing. But here's the
raise
thing.
the money back up,
But
and now
here's the
people are
thing.
just paying the same.
Each time they do that, the workers get less.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like,
1,000%.
Every time there's this disruptor, it's changed kind of the way I'm looking at certain things, because it's like every time the worker gets less, and
Yeah.
this is what's been happening with Disney as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things where these, again, but here's the other part of that. You say every time this comes in, the worker gets less. But if you look at the YouTube model of things, like those people are basically putting on their own productions and getting far more than they
But
would.
but YouTube learned some lessons because the thing with YouTube is that they experience strikes all the time. They experience mini strikes. How do you experience a mini strike? Well, if you're someone and you're creating content and all of that stuff, you're like, "Oh, great. I'm going to create all this content." But if you're not seeing the algorithm put your
Content
videos
out
up
there.
there, you're not seeing the content go, all this stuff, what do you stop doing? You stop creating
Stop making
content.
content.
Then all of a sudden YouTube doesn't have content anymore. And so that's your mini strike. They're experiencing these mini strikes all the time without anybody going and waving banners or anything like that. So YouTube has learned a lot just by looking at the data from their creators.
Well, looking at the data from their creators, but they have it
There's so many creators.
exactly. And that's the thing. There's so many, and YouTube can get so niche that there can be creators that are huge in, for Kristen, the legal space that I have never heard of.
Never heard of. Yeah.
But I tell Chris, oh yeah, Kristen, have you ever heard of this? She's like, oh my gosh, like yes, they are the person to go see whenever you're talking about legal stuff on YouTube. Like, and so because you have all of these things, and YouTube very smartly has shared the ad revenue, like why do you think TikTok and Instagram and all these people are like, hey, creators, come over here, give us content so we can sell ad revenue and we'll share it with you. Like these companies have learned that I don't know, the old heads are still trying to do it the old head way. They're like, I would rather have 50% of a lot than 75% or 80% of even smaller. So yeah, everybody make content. Let's do this thing. And guess what? We'll give you half of the revenue. I don't know
By
if
the
exactly
way,
half.
I was just saying, as a Disney creator, Disney has also learned on YouTube. Because when I first started doing YouTube videos, I have done YouTube videos in the past.
They
I
would
had to
strike
fight
all
Disney
the time.
on copyright stuff. I
Yeah.
had to, oh no, I'm just doing other stuff. Since we've been doing this, Disney
You're
has
like, nope.
not made any copyright claims at all.
Yeah,
I'd
and
love to
because
think
it's
it's because
stupid.
Bob has me on speed dial, but I'm not sure that's the case.
It's just stupid because 97% of the time, it's not somebody who's just sitting and just like
Playing a
pirating
video.
something
Yeah.
live.
Mhm.
It is almost always actually a fair use of the material. You're commenting on it. There's commentary. It's satire. There's all kinds of stuff, and it's silly for them to go after the people who are their core content people.
Their
Like
core
they're
fans.
just
Their core fan
we're-
base. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're just sending more people to Disney.